The Japanese are very unique, so unique that their myths seem to fall from the sky, refusing to answer the original question of all human philosophies: how did people come to be? In the book of Japanese mythology, the Kojiki, there is no process by which heaven and earth were created, and directly the gods of Japan were born.
The names of the deities that were born in the plane of high heaven. When the heaven and earth began were the deity master of the august center of heaven. Next, the high august producing wondrous deity. Next, the divine producing wondrous deity. These three deities were all deities born alone, and hid their persons.
Follow me and subscribe to my channel. In our No Wills Ideas and Myths, we explore how gods created Japan. In fact, there is no creation myth in Japanese mythology, and in the Kojiki, the records of ancient matters, it is said that the gods of Japan came into existence when the heavens and the earth were in their infancy. The gods that descended from the sky at the beginning of heaven and earth are called the gods of Amatsukami, kami of heaven, and those that arose later on the earth are called the gods of Kanetsukami, kami of the land. In describing Japanese myths, it is important to note that the ancient texts on myths in Japan, especially the Nihon Shoki, sometimes translated as the Chronicles of Japan, and the Kojiki, were all written in the traditional Chinese characters. The Japanese phonetic symbol katakana came into existence only after the two ancient books were written in about 800 AD. Therefore, the katakana in our personal and place name annotations are for reference only. If you want to study Japanese ancient books, you need to use traditional Chinese characters as the standard. In addition, the names of Japanese gods are different in the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki, and the differences are enormous. In this article, the names of the gods in the earlier Nihon Shoki are used where not otherwise specified, and the names of the gods in the Kojiki are noted later as far as possible. In Japanese mythology, there are 7 generations of the divine world, which are 12 in total. After the birth of heaven and earth, the first 3 gods were created. IAM no Minakunushi, a male deity, also known as Kakusai Tachi-sun, Kakusai Hammer-sun, and Toyo Pouring Iris-sun. As you can see from the name, this is actually the protective deity of the Japanese nation. As the name suggests, he is the main deity in the heavenly realm, and is located in the center of the heavenly court, where he is the master of all things. Imashi Ashikabi Hikoji, a male deity, and Aminoto Kotachi, a male deity. The Nihon Shoki records 6 accounts of the formation of the heavens and the earth, the 6th of which states that when the heavens and the earth were being formed, there was an object that floated in midair in the shape of a reed shoot, which was first transformed into the IAM no Minakunushi, and then into 2 other deities, namely Imashi Ashikabi Hikoji and Aminoto Kotachi. The gods that followed appeared in pairs, the male god Ohijini and the female goddess Suhajini, Ohijini meaning mud and Suhajini meaning sand, which means that the earth is made of mud and sand. In the Kojiki, it is written as Abiji and Subiji. The male god Otonoji and the female goddess Otamabe were written in the Kojiki as Otonoji and Otanobe. The Otamabe is a symbol of the sex organ and represents the female. The male god Omodaro and the female goddess Kashikona were written in the Kojiki as Omodaru no Makoto and Kashikona no Makoto. The male god Izanagi and the female goddess Izanami were written in the Kojiki as Izanagi no Kami and Izanami no Kami. Izanagi is also called Kasenjinomi Kami or Doshi Daishin. The male god Takami Musubi and the female goddess Kami Musui were written in the Kojiki as Takami Musuhi no Kamiand and Kami Misuhi no Kami, which names means to produce, to generate. The 2 deities, Takami Musubi and Kami Misuhi, represent the 2 elements of yin and yang. The 3 pillar gods, together with the High King and the God Emperor, constitute the 5 Amatsukami gods. In particular, the Kojiki, revised by the King of Japan, and the Nihon Shoki, revised by the Japanese royal family Prince Toneri, in their records of Japanese myths, have been destructively revised. in accordance with their own royal lineage and in combination with Chinese Taoism and Eastern Buddhism, to reflect the divinity of the emperor. As a result, many local myths and legends have been altered or even drowned out. The current official revision of myths has too many corrected records for royal propaganda. In the preface to the Kojiki, the King of Japan instructed, as recorded, that the emperor's record and the present speech are the rationale for the organization of our country and the foundation of the emperor's politics. In the Nihon Shoki records something similar.
Thus, to heaven above, to repay the gods for their kindness of bestowing the country on us. Down on earth, to promulgate the royal grandson's way of rightness. Then, amalgamate all 6 parts of the world and expand our capital. And encompass all 8 corners of the world as our house. Would this not be possible?
In the revised mythology of the royal family, there is no record of the most important main deity, Amino Minakinushi, and there were no places of worship in ancient Japan. This supreme god was probably the Chinese Taoist god Tiandi, the deity of heaven or emperor of heaven. It was not until the Meiji era, when the idea of honoring the emperor emerged, that the Japanese government established the Taikyo Institute as an institution to teach the idea of honoring the emperor and patriotism, and began to worship Amino Minakinushi by setting up places of worship at shrines such as Tokyo Daijingu and Yoshihira Shrine. Izanagi and Izanami are brother and sister, and are the 7th generation of gods. They were ordered by the gods to create the Japanese islands. The 2 deities stand at a place in the sky called Aim no Ukihashi, which means floating bridge of heaven, and use Aim no Nuboko, which means heavenly jeweled spear, to stir the water in the sea, and when they lift it up, the water dripping from the tip of the spear forms an island, which is called Onagoroshima. Motori Norinaga was a Japanese thinker and linguist of the Edo period, and is known as the master of Japanese Kokugaku, literally national study. He asserted that Onagoroshima was a small island near Awaji Island, the largest island in the Seto Inland Sea, and that it might be either Nishima or Tomogashima. The mysterious shape of Nishima Island resembles a magatama falling from the sky. On Nishima Island, there is a shrine in honor of Izanagi and Izanami, Onagoro Jinja, which is located at the top of a sacred mountain on the island, which is revered by the Japanese. In 1994, a very rare rock was discovered on Nishima, known as the Sayagata Shukyoku, which means sheaf-shaped fold, which is considered to be the Chikyu no Shiwa, which means wrinkle of the earth. It is 100 million years old. On the southeast coastline of Nishima Island, there is a towering giant rock about 30 meters high, shaped like a spear, known as Kamitatagami-iwa, which has become a nostalgic symbol and icon, and the origin of the birth of the Japanese nation. This rock, which appears in mythology, is also known as Aim no Mitashira, which means the pillar of heaven, and is said to be the place where Izanagi and Izanami descended to earth. The 2 gods also descended on the island and set up the Aim no Mitashira, which means heavenly pillar, which upheld the hall measuring 8 fathoms, that the gods caused to appear afterwards. The brother and sister decided to make love, but were worried that it would be against the will of the gods. So it was decided that the elder brother, Izanagi, would go clockwise around a pillar, and the younger sister, Izanami, would go counterclockwise around a pillar. And when they met again, the younger sister sang, "Oh, indeed you are a beautiful and kind youth." This would indicate that the 2 have first met and were no longer siblings. However, the elder brother believes that he is male and should sing first, and that it is ominous to let his sister sing first. Izanagi then rebukes Izanami, saying, "It is wrong for the wife to speak first." Nevertheless, the 2 decide to intermingle. Since they are first acquaintances, they can be married. However, these 2 siblings have no experience in sex and do not know how to make love. Although they are rubbing their breasts together, they do not know how to relieve their burning desire. At that time, they saw a couple of Motacilla grandis flying to demonstrate to them. So they got the secret technique of inserting a gun and accomplished the way of husband and wife. They give birth to a deformed child first, known as the Haruko, which means lead child. The child is placed on a reed boat that is dragged by the current. Later, they give birth to a Washima, which means island of foam. Izanagi and Izanami did not want to recognize them as their children. So they ascended to Takamagahara, which means plain of high heaven, and consulted the primordial gods about the ill-formed children born of their union. The gods determined through divination that this was so because the female spoke first when they re-encountered each other. So the couple returned to the Onagoro-shima and retraced their steps around the Ain no Mihashira again. And when they met, Izanagi sang, "I've met a beautiful young woman." This suggests that the social order of men are superior to women, is in accordance with the will of the gods. Once again, the two had intercourse, giving birth to the islands of Japan. In the Chinese Han mythology of Fuxi and Nuwa, the siblings have passed on to many other ethnic groups who have developed unique gods of brother-sister intercourse and reproduction of human beings. Examples include the Miao, Tong, Dao, Yi, and so on. As the union of brother and sister is against ethics, it is necessary to have a solution to the problem. In a legend circulating in Zhongwu, Henan Province, China, an ancient hero, Zhang Fagwo, wanted to eat the meat of Lai Gong, the god of thunder, and caught him and put him in an iron cage. Zhang Fagwo went to pick salt to prepare for pickling Lai Gong, and asked his children, brother and sister Fuxi and Nuwa, to guard the cage, instructing them not to give Lai Gong any water to drink. However, the two could not resist Lai Gong's bitter pleas and gave him a float of water. After drinking the water, Lai Gong gained divine power and broke out of the iron cage. On his way out, he gave the siblings a tooth. The siblings planted it and made a big melon. In order to kill Zhang Fagwo, Lai Gong sent down a great flood. Zhang Fagwo saw the flood on his way home. He held his umbrella upside down, with the water rising to the south heavenly gate. When Lai Gong saw Zhang Fagwo's gate, he was cowed and panicked and hurried to recede the flood. Zhang Fagwo, even with the umbrella fell on the tree, was stuck. Lai Gong then released 12 sun will Zhang Fagwo and burned to death. The body of the oil infiltrated the branches of the tree trunk. The tree turned into a pine tree. When the great flood came, Fuxi and Nuwa jumped into the big melon and floated with the flood for 7 days and 7 nights. When the floodwaters receded, they went to look for water to drink. On the way, they met a tortoise, who told them that all humans were drowned and advised them to get married and reproduce their offspring. Nuwa was furious and picked up a stone and smashed the tortoise into 8 pieces. Later, Fuxi and Nuwa could not bear it and put the 8 pieces together again. The turtle resurrected and still advised the two to marry. So the sister put forward 3 conditions for the marriage to test whether heaven allows it. 1. Lighting incense across the river, where the cigarettes twine in the air. 2. Planting bamboo across the river, the tails of the bamboo can intertwine. 3. Rolling millstones on a high mountain, 2 millstones can come together. Fuxi realized these 3 with the help of the turtle spirit. So the brother and sister had intercourse and gave birth to a winter melon. The two were so enraged that they cut open the winter melon and scattered it. Those scattered on the high mountains became the Yao tribe, and those scattered on the flat land became the Han tribe. In this myth, the brother and sister were to seek the advice of the gods, and the subjects given were impossible to accomplish by human hands. There are also myths where a brother and sister run around a mountain and bump into each other before getting married. Doing so is not against the will of the gods. In late Chinese Han mythology, it appears that Nuwa covered her face with a fan during mating, not just to be shy, but also to show that she did not know Fuxi, and thus was not considered to be violating the heavenly law that siblings may not make love. This episode is similar to the Japanese myth of Izanagi and Izanami, pretending to meet for the first time after circling the pillar. Izanagi and Izanami had intercourse and gave birth to a lot of natural things on the islands of Japan and the corresponding natural gods. And there is no mention of human beings here. Whether or not the plot of conjugal intercourse was influenced by Chinese mythology is unanswerable. After all, the Japanese are not exactly the natives of the Japanese islands. but rather a combination of the people crossing the sea to the east and the local natives. There will be a lot of crossover between their myths and legends. The earliest Jomon people have been found archaeologically to have lived from about the 10th century BC to the 3rd century BC. It has the characteristics of a low-latitude race and some Caucasian race, and it is inferred that it may have migrated to Japan after traveling from Eurasia to the vicinity of the North Pole. The Yao people of the latter period lived from about the 300 BC to 300 AD, and were people who had originally lived on the Korean peninsula, or the Yangtze River Delta, who migrated to the Japanese islands and brought rice to Japan. The modern Yamato nation is largely descended from Yao people and mixed with Koreans, Han Chinese, etc. A 2019 study states that modern Japanese have on average about 90% of the Yao genome and about 10% of the Jomon genome. The siblings Izanagi and Izanami around the pillar, and Fushi and Nuwa around the mountain are metaphors for the deception of the gods. That is, we are no longer siblings but ordinary men and women, meeting for the first time. This is also a metaphor for rebirth, which is similar to Prometheus' trick at Macon. Man's deception of God is a metaphor for man's rebellion against God and the catastrophe of God's punishment of man. We will later specialize in how man grows in the twin paradoxes of worshiping the divine and resisting his God-given destiny. Izanagi and Izanami had intercourse and gave birth to the Japanese islands, including the 8 continents of Japan and many islands, then gave birth to the gods in charge of Japan, such as stone, clay, sand, river, sea, water, mountain, tree, fog, boat, food, and so on, while giving birth to Kagetsuchi, the god of fire. Izanami was burned and died, giving birth to other gods from the vomit and urine remains of her death. Enraged, Izanagi killed Kagetsuchi and cut his body into 8 pieces, which became 8 volcanoes. Kagetsuchi is also similar to Hephaestus in Greek mythology, the patron saint of blacksmiths and ceramic workers. Because he misses his sister, Izanagi goes to Yomi, the shadowy land of the dead, to bring back Izanami. His sister, Izanami, warned Izanagi not to turn back until she was back on Earth. Izanagi on the way back did not hold back. Look back at his sister. The results of his sister pus all over the face. The corpse worms flow, the image of horror. Izanagi fled in horror. Sister Izanami feel humiliated, sent the Yakuza no Ikazuchi no Kami and Shikomi, which means foul women, to chase. At this time, Izanagi throws a peach to drive away them. This was influenced by Chinese Han mythology. In China, the peach is considered a sacred amulet fruit. But when Izanami reached the mouth of the Yomotsu Hirasaka, which means cavern that was the entrance of Yomi, Izanagi blocked the way with a huge stone and created a separation between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The 2 gods confronted each other and said the oath of the severed wife. Izanami then said, "I love my husband, and if I say so, I will hang 1,000 heads of the people you rule." Izanagi replied, "I love my sister, and if I say so, I will produce 1,500 people." He also said, "From now on, I will not pass," separating the realm of yin and yang, and the 2 sides formally parted ways. When Izanagi returned to Earth, he thought it was bad that he had gone to the Yomi. So he went to the plain of Awagihara, a plain covered with awagi, by the river mouth of Tachibana and Himukain, the island of Tsukushi, and purifying himself by bathing in the river. In the process of washing, 3 gods of impurity were born from the clothes he had discarded and the impurities on his body, as well as the god of the sea, the god of the ship, and the 3 precious children, the sun goddess Amaterasu Omikami, the moon deity Tsukiyomi no Makoto, and the storm god Susanoo no Makoto, among other deities. Note that, as we said, there has never been a myth about the creation of human in Japanese mythology. It is only in the farewell between Izanagi and Izanami that Izanami says he will kill 1,000 people a day, and Izanagi says he will give birth to 1,500 people a day. When Izanagi returned to the earth, he washed his left eye and became a god named Amaterasu Omikami. also known as Ohiram no Muchi no Kami, is a Japanese mythological ruler of the Takamagahara, which means plain of high heaven or high plain of heaven, is an island floating in the sea and in the clouds. It is the residence of the gods under the rule of Amaterasu Omikami. Takamagahara is very similar to Mount Olympus in ancient Greek mythology. The gods and goddesses who live in Takamagahara are responsible for ruling the people on the Japanese islands. The higher gods, who are invisible to the heavens, have almost nothing to do with the Japanese people. A well-known Japanese scholar, Hideo Agami, published his theory of the conquest of the dynasty by the horse-riding peoples. He pointed out that the emergence of a unified state in Japan and the creation of the Yamato court were due to the conquest of Japan by the Tatsuhan dynasty of the Fuyao system in Northeast Asia, which was accomplished between the end of the 4th century and the first half of the 5th century. According to him, Takamagahara actually refers to Asia. The horse-riding peoples were roughly close to the Xianbei and Wuhuan, both of which originated from the Donghu, an offshoot of the primitive Mongols, whose language belonged to the Mongol group. This statement coincides with the overall mythological lineage of Japan. That is why, after the formation of the world, only the independent emergence of Japan is emphasized, and it is no longer entangled in how the world and human beings were created, so that there is no need to explain the origin of heaven and earth and how the gods came into being, which are the philosophical problems of the original human beings. Follow me and subscribe to my channel. Share it with more people and let's explore Japanese mythology together. In the next chapter, we recount how the Japanese gods created the King of Japan, after the birth of the Japanese god and ideas and myths by our no will.